South America. Roughly 45 million years ago, a vast sun-scorched grassland stretches to the horizon, and moving through it is something that should not exist. A nightmare assembled from the worst parts of a hawk, a velociraptor, and a battering ram. It stands nearly 3 meters tall. Its skull alone measures 71 centimeters from the back of the cranium to the hooked tip of a beak capable of splitting bone. It doesn't stalk its prey slowly. It doesn't circle from above. It walks straight toward whatever it has decided to kill, with the unhurried confidence of an animal that has no reason to fear anything in its environment. Welcome to the Cenozoic plains, and welcome to the 60-million-year reign of the Phorusrhacids, which you probably know by their far more appropriate common name, the terror birds.
The island that made monsters. To understand why terror birds exist, you need to understand the world that created them. And that world was shaped by one geological reality above all others: isolation. For the majority of the Cenozoic era, from roughly 66 million years ago all the way to about 3 million years ago, South America was an island continent, not connected to North America, not connected to Africa, just drifting slowly westward, surrounded by ocean on all sides, developing its own completely independent ecosystem in complete biological quarantine. And here's the thing about biological isolation. When you take a landmass full of animals and cut it off from the rest of the world, evolution doesn't pause. It accelerates. It gets weird. Species fill every available ecological niche with whatever raw material is available, and the results can be extraordinary.
In South America's case, the mass extinction that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago had cleared out the apex predator roles completely. In the rest of the world, placental mammals were rapidly diversifying to fill those vacated niches. True carnivores, ancestors of the cats and dogs and bears we know today, were spreading and evolving. But South America was cut off. Those placental carnivores couldn't get in. So the roles of large terrestrial predator went to whatever was left. And what was left was birds. Specifically, a lineage descended from something resembling the modern Siriema, an 80-centimeter-tall predatory bird still alive today in the grasslands of South America. These birds began evolving in directions that anywhere else in the world might have been blocked by competition from large mammalian carnivores. But on isolated island South America, nothing was stopping them. And so, over millions of years, they grew and grew and kept growing until you ended up with something standing 3 meters tall with a beak like a pickaxe. The name terror bird wasn't coined by some ancient civilization living in fear of these creatures. It was actually proposed by paleontologist Larry Marshall in 1978, who looked at their fossil skulls and thought fierce appearance was putting it lightly. The name stuck, and it's the one label in all of paleontology that is almost universally agreed to be completely accurate. Not one bird, a dynasty. Here's where it gets more complex and more impressive. Terror birds weren't a single species. They were an entire family, the Phorusrhacidae, that diversified into at least 18 confirmed species over a span of roughly 60 million years, from the Middle Paleocene to the early Pleistocene. And they ranged from almost sensible in size to completely and utterly absurd. The smaller members of the family, genera like Scylopterus, stood about 60 to 90 centimeters tall. These were agile, relatively fast predators of small prey, probably hunting lizards, small mammals, and anything else that fit in their beaks. They were still predators, still carnivores, still built to kill, just doing it at a scale that wouldn't cause you to immediately reconsider your life choices. Then you had the mid-sized members, Undulgalornis stuleti, living in northwestern Argentina roughly 6 million years ago, stood about 1.4 meters tall and weighed around 40 kilograms. Still a serious predator, still something you would not want to encounter on an open plain, but manageable in the sense that a large dog might technically be manageable. And then there were the giants, the ones that make the whole family earn the terror bird name in full. The giants. Anatomy of a living nightmare. Let's start with Phorusrhacidae longissimus, the species that gave the family its name and the one that first put Phorusrhacids on the scientific map. Unearthed from Patagonia in Argentina in 1887, this bird stood nearly 2.4 meters tall and weighed over 130 kilograms. Its skull measured approximately 65 centimeters long and ended in a pronounced distal hook, the kind of curved, downward-pointing tip you'd see on a bird of prey, just massively scaled up. Its three-toed feet were armed with large, curved, laterally compressed claws, a feature it shared with the theropod dinosaurs whose ecological roles it had partially inherited. But Phorusrhacidae wasn't even the biggest. That distinction belongs to Kelenken guillermo, a species discovered in Patagonia and only formally described in 2007. And the story of its discovery is one of my favorite things about paleontology. In March 1999, an Argentine high school student named Guillermo Aguirre Zabala was fossil hunting with a friend near the small village of Comalo in Rio Negro province. About 100 meters from the local train station, between two houses, they found something unusual. Guillermo didn't know what he had. He prepared the specimen himself and contacted the Paleontological Museum in Bariloche. The museum took the fossil into its collection, and it sat there for 5 years before anyone looked at it closely enough to realize what it was. When paleontologists Louis Chiappe and Sarah Bertelli finally examined it in 2006, they understood immediately that this was something new. The skull measured 71.6 centimeters long, the largest bird skull ever found. The beak alone was 46 centimeters, nearly 18 inches, curving in a hook shape that resembled an eagle's beak scaled up to catastrophic proportions. The tarsometatarsus, the lower leg bone, measured 43.7 centimeters. From this leg bone, researchers concluded that Kelenken was a fast runner, more so than other terror birds. Body size estimates place it at a standing height of around 3 meters and a body mass of 220 to 250 kilograms. At that size, it becomes the largest headed bird that has ever existed. The discovery was named in honor of two things: Kelenken, a demon in the mythology of the local Tehuelche people, and Guillermo Aguirre Zabala, the high school student whose curiosity about fossils near a train station led him to find the largest terror bird skull in existence. That discovery also led him to change his university major from psychology to paleontology, which, honestly, is the correct choice. There was also Brontornis, part of the disputed Brontornithini subfamily, a group of gigantic species that were more robust and heavily built than Kelenken's lineage. These animals stood over 2.3 meters at the shoulder and were built less for speed and more for raw power, the tank to Kelenken's sports car. The killing machine. How they actually hunted. Now here's the part that gets genuinely fascinating, because for a long time, scientists assumed terror birds killed the way a crocodile or a lion kills, by grabbing, wrestling, and subduing prey through sustained grappling. And that assumption turned out to be wrong in a way that makes terror birds simultaneously more elegant and more terrifying. In 2010, an international team of researchers decided to put a terror bird skull through a CT scanner. Specifically, they scanned the skull of Andalgalornis, that mid-sized species from northwestern Argentina. And what they found when they ran finite element analysis on the 3D model, essentially running computer simulations of different types of biting and skull loads, was unexpected. The skull of Andalgalornis was extraordinarily rigid compared to most birds, not flexible, not built for wide gaping. Every bone that would normally allow cranial kinesis, the slight flexing motion in most bird skulls, had been effectively fused or thickened into an immobile structure. The lacrimal bone was fused to both the upper bill and the frontal bone. The palatine had become a rigid U-shaped beam. The jugal bar had transformed into a mediolaterally elliptical column. This skull was not designed to flex. It was designed to transmit force in one direction with maximum efficiency.
But when the simulations showed what happened if Andalgalornis shook its head sideways, the kind of motion you'd expect if it was thrashing or wrestling with struggling prey, the stress maps lit up in alarming ways. The researchers described the lateral loading as dangerously high. When shaking its head from side to side, its skull lights up like a Christmas tree, co-author Stephen Rowe noted. If Andalgalornis had tried to grapple with large, struggling prey using lateral shaking motions, the skull would have been at serious risk of catastrophic fracture.
But in the vertical direction, straight down, the skull was enormously strong. Strong and rigid, perfectly designed to drive straight down into a target and pull straight back, using that wickedly recurved beak tip to tear flesh on the withdrawal. What this means for behavior is remarkable. Researchers concluded that Andalgalornis hunted using repeated, precisely targeted strikes, driving that rigid beak down like a hatchet, then retreating before struggling prey could create the dangerous lateral forces. Strike, retreat, strike again, each blow a calculated investment, each retreat a safety margin. Lawrence Whitmer of Ohio University, one of the study's co-authors, described it as a strategy more like Muhammad Ali than Joe Frazier, an outside fighter using speed and precision rather than a slugger absorbing punishment in close quarters. Once prey was killed or incapacitated, the bird would tear it into manageable pieces, using the powerful neck to pull the head straight back or swallow smaller prey whole. The terror birds with smaller species as prey simply tipped their heads back and sent the victim down in one piece. Their modern relatives, the Siriemas, still use a version of this technique. Pick up prey, dash it against the ground repeatedly to render it unconscious or dead, then swallow or tear apart. That behavior, refined and scaled up to monstrous proportions over millions of years, is the inheritance of every terror bird species.
The legs, built to chase. The beak gets all the attention, but the legs deserve equal consideration, because without them, the beak never gets close enough to matter. Terror bird legs were built for speed in ways that went far beyond simple size. The tibiotarsus and tarsometatarsus, the lower leg bones, were elongated relative to body size. The feet were narrow rather than broadly splayed, reducing ground contact time during each stride. And fossil footprints discovered in 2023, the first ever terror bird tracks confirmed from a late Miocene specimen in Argentina, revealed something fascinating about their locomotion.
These tracks showed a functionally two-toed posture rather than the three-toed configuration previously assumed. Digit 2 was reduced to the point where it barely contacted the ground, with the body weight borne almost entirely on a large, thick digit 3, with digit 4 functioning as an outrigger for stability. Researchers immediately compared this to ostriches, which evolved functional two-toed locomotion specifically as an adaptation for fast, sustained bipedal running. The terror bird was converging on the same solution from a completely different evolutionary starting point. The tarso-metatarsus of Kelenken alone measured 43.7 centimeters. That lower leg bone, combined with the evidence for reduced digit weight and high stride frequency, led researchers to conclude Kelenken was among the fastest of all terror birds. Mechanical models of running in Phorusrhacids suggest the medium and larger species were capable of considerable speed, likely competitive with or exceeding the running capabilities of most prey animals in their environment. Some estimates suggest speeds in the range of 40 to 60 kilometers per hour for medium-sized species, though these numbers carry significant uncertainty given how few complete leg skeletons are known.
What's more revealing is the prey they hunted. Large Phorusrhacids likely consumed nota ungulates and litopterns, native South American ungulates exceeding 100 kilograms. These were substantial animals, not small, easily caught prey. Hunting them required either exceptional speed for pursuit or effective ambush capabilities, and the evidence suggests terror birds employed both, depending on species and context. Phorusrhacos, in particular, appears to have been an active macro-predator, given its rigid cranium, relatively high bite force, and stocky mech musculature, all consistent with an animal that regularly tackled large, dangerous prey.
The invasion from the north. For about 57 million years, terror birds held the top predator roles in South America, largely uncontested. The mammalian predators present were marsupials, including Thylacosmilus with its famous saber teeth, and while these were effective hunters in their own right, they were not placental carnivores. They weren't wolves or big cats or anything with the evolutionary pedigree of the carnivorous order. The terror birds coexisted alongside them, and the two groups appear to have divided the landscape without catastrophically excluding each other. Then, around 5 to 3 million years ago, everything changed. The Isthmus of Panama formed, connecting North and South America for the first time since the continents had separated, and what crossed that land bridge, in both directions, fundamentally restructured both continents' ecosystems. This event is known as the Great American Biotic Interchange, and it was one of the most consequential ecological events of the Cenozoic. From the north came dogs, arriving in South America about 2.9 million years ago. Then bears and cats in the early Pleistocene. Saber-toothed felids, the largest and most formidable terrestrial mammalian predators to have evolved, spreading southward into a continent that had never experienced anything like them. And here's the thing that surprises most people about this story. The terror birds didn't just stand there. One species crossed the land bridge going north.
The terror bird that conquered North America. Titanus walleri is one of the most remarkable animals in the entire Cenozoic fossil record. Standing between 1.4 and 1.9 meters tall and weighing around 150 kilograms, Titanus was among the largest of the terror birds, and it was the only confirmed member of the Phorusrhacidae ever found outside of South America. Its fossils have been recovered from Florida and Texas, and here's where the story gets even more interesting. For years, scientists assumed Titanus must have walked north across the newly formed Panamanian land bridge after it rose from the ocean roughly 3 million years ago. A straightforward migration story. Continent connects, bird walks north. But in 2007, a study led by Bruce McFadden at the Florida Museum of Natural History used rare earth element analysis on Titanus fossils to determine their age more precisely than previous methods allowed. And the results revealed that the Texas specimen dated to approximately 5 million years ago, 2 million years before the land bridge fully formed. Titanus had crossed into North America before there was a land bridge to cross.
It either swam or island-hopped through an archipelago of volcanic islands that preceded the final land connection, arriving in North America as one of the earliest colonizers. And when it got there, it didn't immediately go extinct in the face of North American predators. It persisted. For millions of years, Titanus held territory in Florida and possibly Texas, competing with or coexisting alongside North American fauna that included saber-toothed cats and dire wolves. The idea that South American predators were simply outclassed by North American competition gets complicated when you consider that a terror bird did in fact successfully invade North America and hold its ground.
Titanus is currently estimated to have gone extinct by approximately 1.8 million years ago, making it the last known member of the entire Phorusrhacid lineage. Some earlier studies, based on flawed dating of a Texas specimen, suggested Titanus might have survived into the late Pleistocene as recently as 15,000 years ago, which would have put it in contact with the first humans to arrive in the Americas. But subsequent rare earth element analysis overturned this, placing Titanus firmly in the Pliocene and earliest Pleistocene. Whether early humans and terror birds ever shared the same landscape remains uncertain, but the fossil record of Uruguay recently extended the known range of terror birds in South America to approximately 96,000 years ago, making the question at least theoretically worth asking.
Why they vanished. For decades, the standard explanation for terror bird extinction was simple and satisfying. Placental carnivores came south during the Great American Interchange and simply outcompeted them. Birds lost, mammals won. End of story.
But recent synthesis of the fossil record has complicated this narrative considerably, and in ways that make the true story more interesting. A 2026 analysis published in Forbes by biologist Scott Travers, summarizing recent peer-reviewed work, made the point clearly. Phorusrhacids were already declining before many large mammalian predators became widespread in South America. Environmental change, not direct competition, appears to have been the primary driver of their decline.
Specifically, during the late Neogene, the Andes Mountains were rising to their modern heights, fundamentally altering precipitation patterns across South America. Forests that had provided cover for ambush hunting converted to open savannas. Prey communities restructured. Seasonal instability increased. The ecological stage on which terror birds had been performing for 60 million years was being disassembled, not by predators, but by geology and climate. This shift in habitat hurt the terror birds more than their competitors, because an animal that relies on forest cover for ambush approaches or that evolved for specific prey communities loses those advantages when the forest becomes a grassland. Meanwhile, placental carnivores, being generally more ecologically flexible and occupying a wider range of niches, could adapt. The terror birds, specialists in an ecosystem that was literally disappearing, could not adapt quickly enough. Climate change combined with increased competition from North American predators probably led to the terror birds' extinction, with the exact proportions of each cause remaining actively debated among researchers.
The legacy in feathers. Here's what makes the terror birds so remarkable when you step back and look at the full arc of their story. These were birds, creatures descended from small feathered dinosaurs who spent 60 million years filling the ecological roles typically associated with large mammalian predators. They hunted like predatory mammals. They competed with predatory mammals. One of them invaded an entire continent to do it on unfamiliar ground. They achieved this through a combination of skeletal specialization, behavioral adaptation, and the fortunate accident of geographic isolation that gave them the time and space to evolve without competition from the very animals that would eventually replace them.
Their skull was engineered to kill in a way that avoided the mechanical weaknesses of their anatomy. Their legs were designed to approach prey with the efficiency of a machine. Their size commanded the kind of authority on an open plain that prevents most challenges from ever being attempted in the first place.
Their closest living relative is the Siriema, which still runs down prey in South American grasslands, pins it with its feet, and beats it into unconsciousness against the ground before swallowing. Watch a Siriema do this, and you're watching an echo of something 60 million years old. A diminished echo, a shadow of a dynasty, but an echo nonetheless. The terror birds didn't go extinct because they were inadequate. They went extinct because the world stopped being the place that made them possible. And that's a distinction worth holding on to because it says something important. Dominance isn't permanent. Specialization is a two-edged tool, and the most formidable predator on the continent is always subject to forces larger than its own capabilities. If you found this deep dive into the terror birds compelling, make sure to subscribe for more explorations into the animals that ruled Earth before we got here. The Cenozoic was an era of extraordinary creatures, and the Phorusrhacids stand among the most impressive of all of them. The plains of ancient South America were their territory for longer than the age of dinosaurs, and they held it like they owned it, because for 60 million years they genuinely did.